reporter Jen Judson and CSIS analyst Tom Karako discuss growing worldwide air and missile defense activities. Produced by Defense News and Military Times, this is the Early Bird Brief. Each morning, we bring you the defense and national security news of the day.
Passive defense becomes important. The hardening of let's just say, shelters to protect those. Eventually, stuff will get through from time to time.
The pair discuss everything from Patriot batteries in Ukraine to persistent Red Sea attacks to what might be needed to prevent another Tower 22-like attack. I'm your host, Jonathan Lehrfeld. Today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024.
Happy New Year. I know it's February already, but welcome back to another rundown on what's on our radars in missile defense. I'm Jen Judson, land warfare reporter at Defense News, with Tom Karako, missile defense expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Tom, thanks again for joining me at the table here.
Good to be back.
Yeah, a lot has happened. I think we'll kick things off with a few recent headlines in the missile world. I think there's been a heck of a lot of activity in Ukraine, a heck of a lot of activity in the Red Sea, in the Middle East. So let's start with Ukraine. What are some of the things that you're observing when it comes to missile attacks, missile defense performance in Ukraine in the past few months? And there has been quite a bit. So.
The Russians are keeping up the attacks. Obviously, there is concern about the Ukrainian capacity, just how long what they've got will be able to hang on.
Right.
We saw a couple months ago the Japanese kind of helping out by transferring, in kind of in a historic way, transferring some of their PAC-3s to the United States, kind of alleviate some of the supply that we've been sending over there. There have been some public calls recently, in recent weeks, for more Patriots to go. We've talked about this before. It is a scarce asset,
right.
And so there's going to be real limitations on that. I would say another major development there is the transfer of the ground-launched small-diameter bomb. We've talked about that before. I think it was just yesterday, February 14, that some news came out that it had apparently been used in Ukraine, hopefully to good effect. And there's going to be lots more to watch on that space. I
mean, in terms of Patriot, we've talked about this a lot, as you said before. This is one area, particularly in the Army, that has the highest op tempo. So, how realistic is it that you think that Ukraine could eventually get more actual Patriot systems? Patriot missiles. It looks like they're getting some help from Japan, like you said. But there's only so many missiles that we have to give, especially when you think about making sure that you're ready for other areas, other theaters, Indo-PACOM. That's a big concern. Acquisition chief for the Army, Doug Bush, has said that's the biggest concern, is just making sure that you have it for contingencies like Indo-PACOM, and that may seem like it's years away, but you never not want to be prepared for that.
Well, a lot of our Patriots are kind of been shuttled over to the Middle East to kind of tamp things down
too.
in case that accelerates.
It's even more stretched than you can imagine. So, do you think Ukraine would be successful in getting more Patriot over there? I know it's doing well from the reports that I've seen in the news, but it is that asset that they just cannot get enough of, and the Army just cannot give.
Right. Well, I mean, to be fair, though, that there probably will be an ongoing supply, not necessarily just from the United States, but other folks as well. This is a little bit longer term, but it was also gratifying to see that Germany, in recent weeks, signed a really big deal to co-produce the PAC-2s.
Sure.
And so that's going to help, I would say, the global supply side aspect. But that's going to be some years away.
Sure.
But that's a reflection of this. And by the way, Slovakia is also interested, or expressed interest rather, in getting Patriots to replace their national air defense that they gave away to Ukraine a couple years ago. So the other thing is that it's not just about Patriot. And I know the common trope and the headlines of the $2 million interceptor versus the $20,000 or $2,000 drone or something like that. But the fact of the matter is we're really using Patriots against those kind of threats.
Exactly.
There's a lot of gun-based or cheaper stuff that's used and can be used and should be used against those other kinds of threats. So I expect that the Ukrainians are probably husbanding their Patriots, for a good cause.
Sure, absolutely. Shifting over to the Red Sea, I mean, it seems like almost daily we're hearing about shooting down various drones that are buzzing over ships there. Talk about some of the trends that you're seeing. It seems like capabilities are doing their jobs there, but anything you think that the U.S. Navy should be doing differently? Is there going to be a point where this is just too overwhelming? What are your thoughts about what's happening in the Red Sea these days?
Well, look, the performance of the several air defense systems on the USS Gravely and other ships over in the Red Sea has been pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And they've been shooting down quite a bit of stuff. They've been doing some firsts for the Sea Whiz, the close-in weapon system. Also,
great name.
Reportedly, the SM-6, apparently first time used in combat there as well, but lots of SM-2s in addition. And so, there's concern, of course, about the capacity side. But, fundamentally, what's the job of air defense, whether it's on a ship or land, is to buy time to bring other forces to bear. Now, some weeks went by before the Biden administration decided to bring those forces to bear, to strike some targets in Yemen and that sort of stuff. Might have waited a little too long and just sort of played catch a little too long. Air defense can buy space for decision makers, but it doesn't guarantee the decision makers will make sufficiently good decisions. I expect, unfortunately, that that's not going to be insufficient, that it probably didn't bring enough pain to the decision makers, which in this case
doesn't seem to have dropped off in attack rates at this point.
And the thing about proxies to the Iranians is they're expendable, and so they'll reconstitute, unfortunately, and they'll probably
it's not particularly expensive capability that they're sending.
That's right.
And then obviously in very, very sad news in the last couple of months, there was an attack in the Middle East, Tower 22 in Jordan. Talk about what happened there. It sounds like the 6 service members who were killed were sleeping in some sort of compartment shelter, but it's almost like this threat slipped in behind what they determined was a friendly threat. Talk about what you're hearing in terms of what happened there, what your thoughts are on that, and it's whether you think that there was a capability that could have taken care of that if the intel had just been different. Does it seem like we don't have the capability? Or is it just that the techniques, and procedures weren't followed?
I think it was the Wall Street Journal that reported that they thought that the threat UAV that came in, which was subsequently identified, might have kind of trailed a friendly returning. And so what that does is it kind of masks its signature. Let's just say a radar or something picks it up, and it sees a blip, but maybe it sees one blip instead of 2 blips. And it says, okay, well, we know what that is. That's our thing returning. And so whether it was luck or whether it was really well coordinated, I mean, it's obviously very, very unfortunate. Yeah. And that really comes down to a combat ID problem. Sufficient sensors, but also a combat ID to discriminate and identify. We're not going to be shooting at friendlies willy-nilly. And so it's a hard problem. A lot of folks have said, well, where were the coyotes? That kind of stuff. But again, if you don't have the authorization and the threat classification, you're not going to shoot at it. But then that begs the question, well, then what are we supposed to do about this? And I think, as a practical matter, no air defense detection, no air defense classification is perfect. And so at that point, passive defense becomes important. The hardening of let's just say, shelters to protect those. Eventually, stuff will get through from time to time.
I'm not sure if it was a reaction to Tower 22, but we did see the Army rapidly acquire, I think, another 600 Coyote interceptors for $75 million just a few short weeks after that incident. So hard to tell what that was for, but it did have an interesting timing to it. Shifting over to the development world, big news yesterday on Valentine's Valentine's Day.
Present to me.
Yes. It was a nice Valentine's present for those of us in the missile defense world. The HBTSS launched from SpaceX, I believe, a SpaceX platform. And Tom, if you can talk about the significance of these sensors that are going into space. How important are these? What are you going to be watching for? I think they're going to be up there for at least a year assessment, if I'm remembering correctly. So what do they need to accomplish in the next year?
Yeah, so look, this is a really important prototype. It's a cooperation between Missile Defense Agency and Space Development Agency. It had both the hypersonic and ballistic tracking sensor system, but also a bunch of other Tranche 0 things. And so this is sort of the first salvo of getting stuff up there to not just see and have a general sense that, hey, there's a missile been launched, missile warning, but no kidding, tracking, and to tracking these maneuvering hypersonic things with sufficient clarity to be able to do something about it, which is to say to conduct a fire control solution, to send something after it. So they'll be up there, they'll be, tuning themselves and looking for various threat missiles, perhaps looking for some of ours, as LRHW, the long-range hypersonic weapon, hopefully gets tested here soon. And but it's a big day. This is a really important system. We've been talking about space-based missile tracking for about 40 years, and we're finally getting around to it. And this is a good thing.
Yes, an enormous milestone. You mentioned the long-range hypersonic weapon capability, and yes, we are waiting for tests. Are you hearing anything new? Or I think the last time I heard anything, it was another attempt would be made sometime this spring, already behind schedule, at least on the Army side, in fielding hypersonic interceptors to the first unit. They have all the rest of their equipment. It was supposed to be in their hands by the end of the year, but obviously continues to experience issues. Seems to be like directly on the launch pad.
Yeah, well, look, they're not
flights.
I guess there's been different challenges with the targets, with the launcher, things like that. Not been any reports that it's been the missile that's been a problem, and it's a scarce asset, so they want to make sure that when they test it, it's under the best conditions, not just popping it off. And so hopefully that will take place here in the coming weeks and so, and that will be a big step forward for the Army to get something out there, presumably in the Pacific. Probably in the Pacific, to support the MDTFs, the multi-domain task forces and the like, to just have one other, complicating factor in the China deterrence calculus.
What are you hearing? If they have a successful test this spring, are you hearing anything in terms of how quickly that would translate to getting interceptors to the Army, to their first unit?
I would expect that to go, relatively fast.
Yeah.
Last year, they were talking about declaring IOC in September if they had the successful test. So I would expect, if everything goes well, that you'll get it out there. Again, as you noted, they've already been doing a lot of the training and that sort of thing ahead of time. My
eyes are on this one because every time I see delays, I start to worry about ultimate cancellations, and maybe a little traumatized from last week when the Army decided to cancel the future armed reconnaissance aircraft, but that was a little less far along. Well,
that's going to be interesting. Speaking of FARA, haven't specified what, but notionally it's going to be something unmanned.
Yep. Yeah.
And so that's interesting. I can't help but think it kind of is interesting timing in terms of talking about Project Replicator and that sort of thing. Of course, a decent amount of money was spent on FARA before they canceled it, but we'll watch that.
That's it for us this morning. To get more of the top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on social media @defense_news and @military_times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted by me, Jonathan Lehrfeld, and produced by Simone Z. Perez. If you like Jen's conversation today, be sure to check out her work at defensenews.com. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Bruce. Have a great day.